Hi everyone, it's Sian and I'm back again to discuss Chapter 3, the third song from Gabriel's album. Before we begin, if you could please like and subscribe and ring the bell icon, I would really appreciate it. So, I have thoughts about Gabriel's album, Chapter 3. And this week I have actually gone through the manuscript and written down some points that I want to talk about. So it's hopefully going to be a little more coherent, but knowing me, probably not. And then I've got some questions that were on the Chapter 2 video as well as the Chapter 3 video that we will discuss after I've given you my thoughts on everything. So, rundown, I guess. Chapter 3 was the first time they had sex, so that was fun. I think I did a little better reading it out this time. less breaks to just laugh for ages. But the first thing that I really wanted to talk about was the conversation with Harrison and Heather. And I have talked about this before, but one thing that I do love about doing the companion series is that you do get to see very different sides of the characters, and one of them, really a big one where you see that, is from Heather. I love seeing the difference between Heather in the album versus Heather in Gabriel's album. So she's been with the guys for 14 years and she's very comfortable with them. She mentions to Ariana in the album, and she even sort of thinks herself in the wedding, she's not had a lot of female friendships. So girls at school, she wouldn't have a huge amount of girlfriends, and she didn't have a huge amount of women friends once she moved into adulthood, because in school she kind of like was ostracized a bit, and then from there the guys got famous and she just became very wary of the people around her, because a lot of the time they were trying to use her to get to the guys. So she didn't have a lot of these friendships. But then Ariana came along and she started to become friends with her, but she was still kind of putting on her best self for Ariana in the album. As time goes on and throughout the course of the series, you can see how she does become a lot more comfortable with Ariana and starts to get that kind of fun, jokey friendship that she has with the guys with Ariana as well. But in the album, you kind of see her putting her best foot forward, and she's a little bit uncomfortable, but she does get there in the end. And I really love that Gabriel knows, like, because they know each other so well, and the second that he says that Sebastian met Ariana, he knows that Heather is going to be straight on the phone to Sebastian to find out all the gossip. And you do see in the next chapter that she did get on to Sebastian about that. But I'll save that for the next chapter, I guess. One of the other things that I really loved was Gabriel's freak out over being a rich asshole. Because I really wanted to write, when I kind of created these characters, I wanted them to be the band that you wish your idols were. Yeah. So even though they got famous, they remained down to earth and wonderful people and didn't let fame get to their heads. And yeah, I mean, once you have money, you tend to spend money. So they do have a lot of nice things. But that the fact that he is so down to earth makes him realize it, because he's trying not to pressure Ariana, and he wants Ariana to see him as a normal guy, but then he's like, oh my god, I've got all this expensive stuff in my apartment, hopefully she doesn't notice. But he really is like so lovely and down to earth, and that's what I do love about him as a character, that he has remained down to earth throughout everything. Obviously, I think of all of them, Sebastian probably does the most outlandish things, but also you see him again through the course of the series that he has always got time for his fans, which again, I'm just, I guess, trying to write the idols that you wish your idols were.
What?
Not saying anything, but yeah, throughout it all, you know, they've had each other to keep themselves grounded, even though they have these kind of crazy celebrity lifestyles and these hyper-realistic celebrity things that happen to them throughout the series, but they always have each other and they are a family, and they do kind of keep their feet on the ground even amidst all of this kind of craziness, and that their lives have gotten so out of control almost through some of the things that happen in the series. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But they So this moment where he's freaking out about I'm going to talk about this. Okay, the Glenfiddich. I can't. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for butchering the name of that whiskey. I Googled how to pronounce it. I realized when I was recording it, I was like, oh crap, why did I use that? I could have used any type of whiskey. And now I have to try and say it right. And every time I was like, oh no, I know I'm not doing it right. But that's as close as it's going to get. And that's what you're going to hear throughout this series. Anytime it's mentioned and I'm reading it, it's going to be Glenfiddich. It's as close as I can get. I'm sorry. But yeah, the moment where Gabriel freaks out about the bottle of Glenfiddich. When he freaks out about the whiskey being expensive whiskey. I just thought that was really cute. Not that Ariana noticed, but it's just, again, being in his head and seeing these little things that he thinks about. It's really nice. The other thing that came up was the baby name talk. And I actually really stand by this and I feel vindicated about this. So I read, obviously, chapter 3 out last week because I was supposed to post it on Thursday, but that's another story. So I'd read that out last week, and then on the weekend, I was talking to a friend of mine who was saying that she writes under a pen name, and she was saying that she identifies more strongly with her pen name than with her actual legal name, and she's actually considering changing her name legally to her pen name, which stands by what I wrote, that you name a baby at birth and you don't know for sure that that name is going to suit that baby. So it's actually funny, this chapter 3 didn't actually exist in the, not only just the original manuscript, but the first edition of the book. So I'm pretty sure I mentioned before, but I rewrote the album based on reader feedback. And one of the pieces of reader feedback that I took on board was that people felt Gabriel and Ariana's relationship was rushed in the beginning. So this date did happen, but it was skipped over. So it went straight from the first date to the next date at April's birthday party. And it's kind of just mentioned that, oh yeah, they had that date. So when people were saying that they felt the relationship was rushed, I thought about it and I thought, yeah, no, there is a missing chapter there where you get to see them connecting on this other level outside of, and again, like, so Gabriel's had this date at his house to try and keep it low key, keep it so that he's not being recognized, and try and make sure that Ariana's comfortable. And then of course they have sex. For the record, that was not why he had it at his apartment. It was mostly about Ariana being comfortable. And yes, the sex was an added bonus for him. So this chapter I ended up adding, but it has actually turned out to be one of my favorite chapters because we do get to see them in that initial kind of falling for each other stage where they're learning things about each other, about their families, and just setting the groundwork for what will become their relationship down the track and how they interact with one another. And you definitely see Gabriel making fun of her for overthinking things, and Ariana absolutely overthinks things because as part of, like, she's obviously got bad anxiety. That goes without saying, I would think, but I will say it anyway. She has bad anxiety. And part of why I needed to rewrite the album, so the album has been rewritten 3 times. The first time I took out the flashbacks, the second time what did I do the second time? The second time might be when I added chapter 3 and made a couple of other little changes. And then last October, I think, October 2020, I think is when Beata and I went through it. And Beata, more. She would just highlight sections of the book. Just right, just that would be the comment, more. So we kind of worked out that the issue with the album And I got a 1-star review that I absolutely stand by. So I'm a big proponent of there is no problem with 1-star reviews unless you agree with them. If you agree with a 1-star review, you've got a problem. And I had a problem. When I went back, I think it was up last October. So my audiobook narrator was starting to consider working on the album, and I was like, well, please let me make it perfect before you do that and set it in stone. Go with the wedding. It does need changes. It's fine. Did need changes. Did change a couple of things, again based on reader feedback. But when I went back and looked through it, and at that point I had written the album, the wedding, the baby, dreams, probably, I think, yeah. And I was starting, I was starting on Gabriel's album, but I was kind of blocked on Gabriel's album because I knew that the album wasn't as good as it could be. And I needed to get it to the point where I could then base Gabriel's album off it, and I couldn't. So when I looked through it, at that point, I was like, this 1-star review that I'd gotten said, the author needs to take a class on show, not tell. And when I first got that review, I was like, ouch, that really hurts. I'm really upset. But when I went back through it, I was like, how in the blue hell does this book have a 4.0 star rating? Because this is like a 2-star book. The problem came down to essentially this. I told the reader that Ariana had anxiety. I said she had issues, but I never displayed them. And the reason I think for that is because Ariana is the heroine most like me, and it's very tough to put your own emotions on display for people to judge and read it about or whatever. So it's hard to do that. But also, Ariana, for the vast majority of the album / Gabriel's album, is me at basically my worst point. So to get into her headspace and kind of dig into her emotions meant getting into like my bad headspace and dig into my bad emotions. And the way that I behaved sort of when I was not as mentally well as I kind of hope I am now. So that was really, it was some of the parts were really difficult. It was really hard to, and Beata would be like, you're kind of skimming over here. Look, I know it's hard, but you were skimming over this. And there would be bits where I would like kind of just chicken out and just be like, and then Ariana cried and ran away or whatever. Like, not quite that bad, but it was obvious. And when Beata would highlight and say more, I'd be like, she's right. She's right. I know what I need to write here. And I don't want to write it because it's really hard. But it was why the album that got the last rewrite and basically set in stone now, because my narrator will be narrating it in a couple of months, at which point no changes can be made because it's got to match. So the next thing that I was going to talk about was the conversation about fame and hating Gabriel's world. It was really interesting again to see his take on that, where he's like, this gives me hope, but also what do I do with this information that she's just given me, because I'm a rock star, that's not changing. But what we don't know yet is why she is so averse to fame, because it's a very strange position for her to be in, and we do find out. But it is like there is a reasoning behind it. It's not just her just being, I don't know what reason. We do find out why she hates his world. But in the meantime, he's just going off the information that he has at this point, and he is kind of confused, really. He really likes her, and he's, oh my God, Gabriel has the patience of a saint. But again, he finds out her reason, and then he kind of understands why, and that's part of why he has the patience of a saint. I really like later in the series when somebody else finds out Ariana's reason. They're like, wait, Gabriel knew? Okay, yeah, no, now that makes sense. And I think that, and the last thing that I made a point on was consent, consent, consent. I absolutely think that the sexiest thing a hero can do is get enthusiastic consent from his heroine, particularly in first sexual encounter situations, first time doing it. It absolutely needs to be clear that consent is there. Like, it shouldn't be grey, because consent is not, there's no shades of grey with consent. It's black or it's white. It's a yes or it's a no. And an is not a yes. A maybe, not a yes. Only a yes is a yes. So, enthusiastic consent is something that I always try and include, particularly in, like I said, the first sexual encounter between the hero and the heroine, because obviously, you know, in the wedding, Heather and Harrison have been together for 10 years. They live together. There's not like going to be a conversation between them before they do anything sexual. They have lived together for a long time. They know each other's signs. There's like a lot of, and not to say that consent is a foregone conclusion within a relationship. It's a very different dynamic than Gabriel's first time with Ariana versus Heather and Harrison having been together for 10 years and living together. And, you know, I think the first time that we see them do anything sexual, Harrison's, you know, in a towel after having had a shower in their bedroom. It's a lot different. So I don't think I did too bad a job reading out the sex this time. I managed to do most of it without laughing and without having to stop. I think I screwed up a couple of words and I was just like, what? Why me? But in general, not too bad. And I definitely, if you have listened to me read that chapter, let's never speak about what you've heard come out of my mouth, okay? That's between you and the video you watched. That is not between you and Sean. That's between you and video Sean. You and Sean don't ever need to talk about that, okay? That being said, we will move on to the questions. So I've got a few here to answer, and then I think we'll be done. So the first question I've got is, where did the idea of writing a rock star romance come from? Okay, two parts to this. I think in general, the reason why I was always drawn to rock star romance is because I'm not going to trash a book publicly. So I'm going to tell you what the book's about and I'm not going to tell you the name. When I was 10, my friends, my cousin was 15 and he was in year 10, and he had this book from the library and I liked the cover of it and I really wanted to read it, and he told me that I couldn't. I, being the rebel that I am, stole the book and read it. That book is about a rock star that, I'm just going to put a trigger warning on this actually. So trigger warning, and I will flash up here. I'll flash up now the timestamp of where to skip forward to. Cool. So that book is about a rock star that rapes a girl and gets her pregnant, but it was very much romanticized. And that was my favorite book for decades. Long time. I would tell you that that was my favorite book. He was my favorite hero. Now, I read it back again last year, and I hate that I still like it, and I still like it, I think, because of that long time enjoyment of the story, but also was horrified by it. She gets victim blamed. Everybody in her life sells her out because he is rich and famous and handsome. And they constantly sell her out. But I don't actually have a problem with that story, as long as there's a point to the story, and that point being, this is not okay. But that's not the way that it comes across in this book, that it comes across very much romanticizing it, and that they're meant to be, and it's actually really gross. So I don't recommend the book to anyone anymore. I can't in good conscience recommend it to anyone. If you have not read it, then you are not losing out by not reading it. I recognize that I only enjoy it because, again, I read that at 10. Just take a second to appreciate that. I read this book when I was 10 years old. That's pretty formative. My cousin was right, by the way. When he said I shouldn't read it, he was absolutely right that I shouldn't read it. He goes to me, hey, I can't find my library book. I was like, oh yeah, I read that. And he was like, you what? So, Rebel Sean, 10-year-old, reading this book. Just the thought of like my niece is 11. The thought of her reading that makes me want to cry. Oh my God. So, short answer. One of my favorite books growing up was a rockstar romance. I use the word romance very loosely there. Very, very loosely. But the specific idea of writing the album came from the All-American Reject song, Gives You Hell. When you see my face, hope it gives you hell, hope it gives you hell. So I really loved the idea of the normal girl who dated the rock star and then left him and went back to an everyday life. And why did she leave him? And for what reason? And then, of course, she has to deal with her ex being a rock star. And that was the specific inspiration behind the story of the album. Every other part of Cruise Control and their overarching story through the series and each character's stories came from that one song, basically. The next question. What does your hubby think about you writing steamy scenes? Writing in general, and does he read your books? Writing in general, I think he thinks it takes a lot of time away from the family. The wedding, for example, was 5 weeks to the day I wrote that book. I came up for dinner and bedtimes, and then that was it. I would like get up, go to work, I'd write on my lunch break, I'd come home, I'd write, I'd pop up for dinner, I'd go back and write, I'd go do bedtime with boys, I'd go back and write, and that was my life for 5 weeks. So a lot of the time, I think he thinks it takes a lot of time away from the family. I think he understands that it does fulfill me. I do get creatively fulfilled by writing, and it is obviously quite meaningful to me, and he's very supportive, which I appreciate. He has not read my books, which I don't know if I want him to or not. He will read it. He knows all about my books because he hears me talk all about my books, but he's not actually read them. He does occasionally. Drives me nuts. I'll be writing on my laptop in bed and he'll just like look over it and then he'll just like read a line really dramatically. I'm like, stop, I can't. I particularly cannot write steamy scenes with anybody else around. It's too awkward. I have to go be somewhere alone in private, and that does sound dodgy, but it's fucking, it's just so that I can have some privacy, to not feel uncomfortable. I really can't, I can't stand it when he's looking at the screen if I'm trying to write. So the next question, and those two questions came from Diane. Thank you, Diane. Ali asked the next question. Yes, the Ali. If you've read The Wedding / Harrison's Wedding / The Baby / I guess Sebastian's Baby, that Ali. She says, speaking of naming children, how hard was it to name your characters? Did you research the histories and meanings behind them? Well, I guess I've just told you one thing. I do name characters after friends and family. I will joke with you that if I like you, your name will probably end up in one of my books. There are only 2 characters now. For the longest time, there was just one where I used first and last name, and that was Callum Archer. And I asked him if I could use his full name. Up to that point, I had been using people's first and last names willy-nilly in my books with no regrets and no compunction and no care about telling them. One of my friends actually read the wedding, I think. Oh, read the album. And she said, where did the author get the last name for Harrison? And I was like, oh yeah, that's absolutely your last name. And she goes, I'm just glad I got the same band member. So when I decided that I was going to name a character Callum, and because I just thought his name was really cool, Callum Archer, I was like, can I use your whole name? And he was the only one up until the Stalker when I decided to name a character after Isaac. And the only caveat, I said, you know, if you don't want me to use your last name, I won't use your last name. The only caveat he had was he wanted an E put on the end. So, like, the same way it's spelled for Morris Mead for great looking hair. So there's only 2 characters where I've named the character with the full name. But yeah, there's an Ali in there. I'm pretty sure, yeah, Diane. Diane got, so obviously the only people who are commenting now are people who are long-time readers and friends. But Diane got pretty sure she got the interviewer in the wedding named after her. Ali obviously got Ali. She got to have sex with Hayden. And Dana got to have sex with Sebastian. But Dana claimed Hayden, and we're all really sad. But Ali actually got to do him. So, you know, obviously I like her more. I'm joking. I gave Ali Hayden before I realised how hot Hayden was and how lucky she was, really. But I mean, it's obviously, book Ali is not real life Ali. There's 2 different people, and that's funny. Oh, the other one, Lolita. When I finished the album, all the ladies at work were wanting their names in the book. And one of the ladies at work is Lol, or Lolita. And I was like, Lolita is a heroine name if ever I've heard one. But I couldn't write sex scenes with Lol in there, so I had to have her nickname be something else, which is how she ended up as Lolita, which I also think is cooler. No offense, Lol, if you watch this. No offense. But so she ended up as Lita. But then I did, because I kind of swore that there was no way I'd be able to write sex scenes where I had even Lolita, because I think of Lol, obviously. Once I'm writing about a character, they do become a fully formed person in my head. So even now when I'm saying Ali slept with Hayden, in my head, I'm actually thinking of book Ali versus real life Ali, but also mixing them together. Wow. Have I gone off on a tangent or what? Yes, it is really hard to name characters. The only ones I looked up the meanings for were Gabriel and his sisters, because I wanted to do the celestial theme for them. But I think I actually did that when I was writing the baby. Yes, because that came before the rewrite. I wanted to do the celestial thing, so I definitely looked up celestial angel names for babies to find Gabriel and his sisters' names. And then I looked up Ariana's name meaning, which was very conveniently very holy. So that worked out quite nicely. The other ones I've looked up meanings for were Lolita's. Lolita Serafina Ciccone. So Lolita and Serafina, I looked that up because I think I might have looked up the meaning before I picked Serafina, maybe. And the other one that I looked up was the baby name for in the baby. I wanted something really meaningful that would work. Other than that, I just try not to give characters the same names as other characters, which I have failed at miserably. I had to rename the friend of Tatiana's, and I've got to fix up the sneak peek at the back of baby because I had to rename him because the therapist is Brendan, and then I randomly named Tatiana's friend Brendan as well, but the therapist Brendan became far more important as the series went along, and I started writing the companions, and I was like, so when I was writing the Stalker, I renamed Brendan to Mark, which is after my proofreader. That was a long pause. Which was after my proofreader. And also read music. It was after my proofreader, Mark Reed. So I've named a couple of things after Mark. Because he is that awesome that he needed both. He needed two things named after him. But Reed also works for Lorna as well. His wife, who does my formatting. They're amazing. They're so brilliant. But that's another topic for another day. I am going off on a tangent. Next question from Dana, who hooked up with Sebastian in the sneak peek of the baby. What type of whiskey do Gabe and Seb drink? And I answered that earlier. And if your goal here was to make me say it again, it's Glenfiddich. I can't do it. Anywho, moving right along. Oh, I love this question. How would you feel if you met Heather in real life? And do you think you'd mind her busybody nosiness? Ooh. I think Heather and I would probably be frenemies. I hate to say it. I would be on edge, I think, around her. I feel like she would be very imposing for me. I would be scared of her a little bit. Not even gonna lie. She's pretty awesome, but I would be worried about upsetting her in any way, shape, or form. And she is really... See, Dana's read all of the series, so she knows, like, Heather just is all up in everybody's business. But in a good way, only because she cares. Alright, so my phone ran out of storage. I cleared it. I started recording again. I forgot to hit the record button. This is like my 5th time doing this. I discovered that my hair was a mess during the whole main video. I am not recording it again. Let's just go pick up from where we left off, which was Heather. I'm very tired because it's 12:57 a.m. Let's get this done. Last 2 questions, also from Dana. What is your perspective on enthusiastic consent and condoms/protections in novels? Obviously, I've talked about enthusiastic consent. Definitely a proponent for it. Also a huge proponent of normalizing the use of condoms and protections in protection. Particularly where it is, you know, a brand new sexual partner, you should absolutely be using protection. I didn't mention it in the wedding, but Heather and Harrison don't use protection because Heather has an IUD. They've been together for 10 years. They're only having sex with each other. They're only sleeping with each other, so they don't need to use condoms because she has an IUD. But absolutely, we should be normalizing it, particularly where there are new sexual partners. 100%. Big fan of that. And all of my novels have that. So, last question, also from Dana, which was very interesting. The first time I read it 4 videos ago. How do you feel about guys calling women sweetheart? This was a really interesting question. What's funny is, of course, Ariana is the heroine most like me, and sweetheart is actually what my husband calls me. So I'm fine with pet names in relationships, but obviously if it's a complete stranger, no, that's kind of creepy and gross. People don't use pet names for strangers. It's just yucky. But where you're in a relationship, absolutely. I mean, if they call you sweetheart, if you don't like it, tell them. And if they keep calling you sweetheart after you say, stop, I don't like it, they're an asshole and you should get rid of them. And that's really basically it on that. But yes, in short, I think it's nice and cute that Gabriel does that. But yeah, it would be less cute if he was just a rando at a grocery store. Anyway, that is it for... I just discovered that my dress has pockets.
Yes!
I should have realised because it's Dangerfield. Sorry. I'm really excited. That is it for my thoughts and answering questions about chapter 3, the 3rd song. I will be back on Thursday reading chapter 4, the 4th song, where Gabriel takes Ariana to April Conway's 21st birthday party, and that's actually a really interesting chapter. I'm very much looking forward to doing the discussion on that one. In the meantime, please like this video, please subscribe, please tell your friends, please share it, and come along as we continue to read Gabriel's album and I give you my thoughts very incoherently and apparently over many, many video recordings. I'll see you then. Bye.